Hello and welcome. I'm Exit Light and this is my channel. Today we're going to talk about two instances of people disappearing. One, which many believe is a time traveler, and another, very famous case of Roanoke, the missing colony. Before we get started, a couple of things. It's almost October, if you can believe that. And on the 1st of October, we will begin the 31 days of Halloween. If you would like to, or inclined to, please send me your true paranormal experience. Write it out, give me all the good details, and I will narrate it, giving you full credit. And if you have a page, Facebook, Twitter, you name it, whatever it is, YouTube. If you have somewhere that you'd like people to be directed for your content, I will also include that. We would like this 31 Days of Halloween to be community oriented. And I have already started putting videos up in the queue. So if you could please do that. Or if you would like to write a story, I will narrate that and again give you all the credit and also promote whatever it is that you would like to promote for your content. All right, so why don't we get started with the mysterious case of Benjamin Bathurst. Benjamin Bathurst was a British diplomat who disappeared without a trace in Germany in 1809. Now, this probably doesn't sound too mysterious, considering how common murders, robberies, and bandits were in Prussia during the Napoleonic Wars, in a day and age when sophisticated forensics didn't exist. However, his disappearance was notably sudden, to say the least. So sudden that many attribute it to a supernatural cause, even suggesting that he hopped between dimensions. Bathurst was traveling through Prussia at the time, under the alias of Baron de Koch. He and his German courier stopped in the town of Perlberg at an inn called the White Swan, while they waited for fresh horses to be harnessed to their carriage. After staying for a few hours, they were notified that their carriage was ready. Bathurst left the room immediately, and his companion followed quickly behind him, only to find that Bathurst had completely disappeared in the short distance between the inn and the carriage. No sign of the diplomat could be found, and at first the search was not mobilized because Bathurst was traveling under an alias as a commercial traveler. Therefore, his disappearance was not noted until his companion managed to travel back to England with the news. Then, Bathurst's wife immediately left for Germany, where Captain von Klitzing had already begun to mobilize his troops for what would ultimately be a fruitless search. Now, they did find a couple of strange things. One was a very expensive men's fur coat, and they found it in the outhouse of a family that worked at the White Swan. Later, much more strange, they found his pantaloons in the forest near Perlberg. But other than that, there was no trace of the man, and he was never discovered. Contemporary reports argued over whether Bathurst was in his right mind as he traveled through Prussia, with many investigators working under the impression that perhaps he had chosen to disappear of his own accord, though most historic accounts of Bathurst's disappearance come from Sabine Baring Gould's Historic Oddities and Strange Events, in which she writes, "On Mr. Bathurst's return to the inn, he countermanded the horses. He said he would not start till night. He considered that it would be safer for him to spin along the dangerous portion of the route by night, when Napoleon's spies would be less likely to be on the alert. He remained in the inn writing and burning papers. At 7 o'clock, he dismissed the soldiers on guard and ordered their horses to be ready by 9. He stood outside the inn watching his portmanteau, which had been taken within, being replaced on the carriage. He stepped around to the heads of the horses and disappeared, never to be seen again." Baring Gould does go on to say that it was quite dark around this time, and although there were plenty of witnesses in the courtyard, not many of them were paying attention to the man. Many of the witnesses who did notice him had noted that he seemed agitated in the hours before he disappeared, as though he knew he was in danger. Whether this was because the French were close by in the area, or because he was mentally ill, or because he was potentially suicidal, or even for another stranger reason, no one knows. The suddenness and completeness of his disappearance has always been a point of interest, however, to the point where it has inspired a number of science fiction stories and novels. The most notable one was He Walked Around the Horses, a science fiction novel in which Bathurst slips into an alternate universe from the courtyard of the White Swan. There was never any conclusive evidence of what really happened to Bathurst. In 1852, a skeleton was discovered under the threshold of a stable by a house about 300 paces from the White Swan. The skull was fractured as if by a heavy instrument, and one of the lower molars had been removed by a dentist. While this skull was investigated, it was never conclusively decided whether it was Bathurst's or not. So, was Bathurst a victim of murder? Was there a French kidnapping? Or did he simply step out of this world and into another, as many suggest? And as with most of these mysteries, we will probably never know. The next one, and most famous tonight, is Roanoke, also known as the Lost Colony. Another historical disappearance, the story of Roanoke is far stranger and greater in scale. It concerns an event in early American history when an entire colony disappeared without a trace, earning the nickname the Lost Colony. The colony was founded in 1585 by Sir Walter Raleigh, the earliest of a number of attempts by Queen Elizabeth I to establish a permanent English settlement on the American continent. In April 1585, Raleigh sent an exploratory expedition to America to find the best place to establish a colony. The first reached Roanoke Island, and even brought 2 of the native Croatoan people back to England. They told Raleigh about the politics and geography of the area. Later that year, a second expedition returned to establish a colony on the island, though that began quite badly. Stopping in at a native village, the English came to believe that a native person from the village had stolen a silver cup. So, as one does, in retaliation, they robbed and burned the village to the ground. An initial attempt at colonization was also unsuccessful when the small Roanoke settlement suffered an attack from the native tribes. Explorer Sir Francis Drake, soon after, stopped by the colony so he could take the colonists back to England. However, when the relief fleet arrived to find the colony abandoned, the fleet returned quickly to England, leaving only 15 men as garrison. And then the next English ship that stopped by Roanoke was a ship of colonists intending to go to Chesapeake Bay in 1587. Though when they found no trace of the garrison that had been left behind, the fleet's commander insisted that they go ahead and establish a colony on Roanoke Island. They reformed relations with the Croatians and other tribes, but some still remained hostile towards them. After a colonist was killed by a native while out alone, the colonists sent their governor back to England to ask for help for Roanoke. Around 115 people were left behind on the island, among them Virginia Dare, the first English-born child in America, and also Governor White's granddaughter. With problems rising back home in England, Governor White was unable to return to Roanoke for 3 years. He landed again in August of 1590, but the settlement was deserted. Of a colony that had been left with 90 men, 17 women, and 11 children, not a single one could be found, alive or dead. While it's clear that many of the local natives harbored ill will towards the colonists, there was also no sign of a struggle or a battle at the site of the colony. The only sign the colonists had left was the word Croatoan, carved into a fence post. The colony did show signs of an unhurried departure. Houses and fortifications had been dismantled, and the only answer White could imagine was that the colony had moved to Croatoan Island. With his men keen to move on and a storm brewing, the matter could not be investigated at that point in time. 12 years passed before Raleigh launched an investigation into the fate of the lost colony, but this ship never made it to Roanoke. The Spanish stumbled upon the remains of the colony by accident, but after this point no further effort was ever expended looking for the colony, and no trace of the people was ever found. There are a number of theories as to what happened to the colonists of Roanoke Island, none of them more or less conclusive than the other, although I have some evidence coming up shortly. Chief Powhatan is said to have bragged to the later English settlers of Jamestown that he was responsible for the slaughter of the lost colonists after they had moved their colony elsewhere from Roanoke Island. Other accounts suggest that the Roanoke colonists moved elsewhere and integrated with the native tribes. There are a number of cases where native populations are said to have either English-looking features or similar surnames, and even words in their dialect that are used or had been used by the original settlers. In a new book released on June 15th of this year, called The Lost Colony and Hatteras Island, there are some ideas of what happened to the people of Roanoke. So, the Roanoke colonists left a clue, the word Croatoan, carved on a wooden post. The Croatoans were a friendly tribe, and they resided on Hatteras Island. They were also the home tribe of Manteo, who was a Native American who learned English and then acted as an interpreter. Scott Dawson, who is a native of Hatteras Island and a hobby archaeologist, grew up hearing the many stories and questions about the Roanoke tribe. Scott Dawson, who is a native of Hatteras Island and a hobby archaeologist, grew up hearing all the stories and all of the conjecture. He's quoted as saying that he saw a lot of artifacts coming up when people were building homes, or sometimes from erosion from storms. He said that it gutted him that no one was doing anything about it, so he created the Croatoan Archaeological Society. His main focus was to see if he could find the colonists on Hatteras, where they all but said they were going, and where no one has ever really looked for them until now. Now, keep this in mind. The colony didn't know they were lost. They knew where they were. They knew that they had left a clue as to where they had gone. In their minds, someone was going to come back with the resupplies. Dawson reached out to experts for help. His mission sparked the interest of a well-established British archaeologist, Professor Mark Horton, from the University of Bristol. He said, "I think it's really interesting, this point. You know, why are a bunch of Brits working on the site in North Carolina? I suppose the answer to that is that it is our history and our heritage as much as it is yours. It's part of that shared story," explained Horton. "I've been excavating 16th century sites in England for a very long time and thought, well, maybe I could bring a new perspective on this problem because we know what this stuff actually looks like." And so they began digging in 2009 and have returned every year since. The team consists of local volunteers to world-renowned specialists in every type of field. I would love to do this. It's not just the archaeology, but it's all the science that goes with it, Horton said. The analytical science, the investigation of the animal bones, the ceramics, the dating. A project like this is a multi-discipline investigation of great complexity. Under layers and layers of dirt, the team found what they had come for. 16th century items included copper rings, sword handles, earrings, a Nuremberg token, writing slates, glass. The only logical explanation for that was that they had come from the lost colony. The female items are particularly telling. The 1587 colony was the only one to ever bring English women. There is evidence to support other theories, Horton says, that there might not just be one answer to their fate. He's quoted as saying, "When these colonies became abandoned, what you see is a massive political eruption and disagreements and people just walking away from everything." He says it's not unlikely that one group might have gone up the Chesapeake, another up the Albemarle, but that he's pretty confident that at least one group, probably the most substantial part of the group, came to Hatteras Island. Horton argues it also makes a lot of sense for the colonists to have gone to Hatteras. They probably would have done this to go out to the point of the Outer Banks where you could see vessels passing by most easily. And he continued that we know the Native American communities there were friendly to the settlers, so it was a good place with one's allies in place where you could potentially be rescued. Dawson says that they believe they've now located their survivors' camp, where the colonists would have set up when they first arrived to Hatteras from Roanoke, before they eventually integrated with the Croatoans. The team was supposed to excavate this site until this spring, but the coronavirus obviously pushed back the timeline to at least 2021. So hopefully we'll be getting a lot more answers out of that. If you have liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps the channel. If you are not subscribed and you would like to be, please go ahead and subscribe. And if you'd like to be notified when my content goes live, go ahead and click that bell. And below I'll have links for my new merchandise. And if you would like to donate to my channel, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you, and good night.